You walk into a library. No one is there. Not a single soul behind the front desk. Not one person at any of the tables. And yet, when you speak, your voice drops without you deciding to drop it. But the real answer is far stranger than habit. It has nothing to do with the people who aren't there. It has everything to do with a part of your brain that doesn't care whether anyone is watching at all. You probably think you whisper in libraries to avoid disturbing other people. That makes sense on the surface. But here's the strange part. Researchers have tested this exact assumption, and the results don't hold up. Even when there's no one around to disturb, the whisper still happens. So what is actually controlling your voice? Think about that for a second. If it isn't other people, what is it? In 2003, two psychologists named Henk Arts and Abt Dijksterhuis ran an experiment that should unsettle you a little. They showed people photographs of a library. Just photographs. No real library. No real books. No real silence required. And then they measured something specific. How loudly those people spoke afterward. The effect was immediate. People who'd simply looked at a picture of a library spoke more quietly than people who hadn't. Their brains had registered library as a category, and that category came preloaded with an instruction. Be quiet. You didn't choose this. Somewhere in your development, a connection got built between a place and a behavior, and now the place alone is enough to trigger the behavior, no matter who's actually in the room. This is what psychologists call a situational norm. Not a rule someone enforces, not a law written down anywhere. A pattern your mind absorbs so completely that it now runs automatically, like a reflex wearing the costume of a choice. Here's where it gets more specific and more uncomfortable. The psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying why people follow norms at all, and he found that there are actually two different kinds operating at once, and they don't always agree with each other. One kind is called a descriptive norm. That's simply what most people actually do. If you watch 100 people walk through a library and 95 of them are quiet, the descriptive norm is quiet. The other kind is called an injunctive norm. That's what people believe they're supposed to do, whether or not anyone is enforcing it. The injunctive norm in a library doesn't care if the room is empty. It doesn't care if there's no librarian glaring over the front desk. It's a standard baked into the category itself, sitting there ready to fire the instant you walk in. And here's the part that should really catch your attention. Cialdini's research found that injunctive norms can activate behavior even in total isolation, because the behavior was never really about the people in the room. It was about a story you absorbed long before you ever set foot in that specific room, on that specific day. So where did the story come from? Go back further than you might expect. Long before public libraries existed the way you know them, the closest equivalent was the monastery. Monks copying manuscripts by candlelight in scriptoriums built specifically for quiet, focused, repetitive work. Christian monasticism treated silence as something close to sacred, not because noise was rude, but because noise was believed to fracture a person's connection to something larger than themselves. Monks developed elaborate systems of hand signals just to avoid breaking that silence, sometimes using over 100 different gestures so they could communicate without ever opening their mouths. When the first libraries as we'd recognize them began forming in medieval Europe, they grew directly out of these monastic collections. The silence didn't get added to libraries later as a practical convenience. The silence was there from the very beginning, inherited wholesale from buildings designed to feel like the threshold of something holy. Your modern library, with its fluorescent lighting and laminated bookmarks and motion sensor doors, is still wearing the architecture of a much older idea. That this room is different from other rooms, and that difference deserves your silence as a kind of tribute. You don't consciously know any of this history when you walk in. You don't need to. The instruction got passed down anyway, layered into the category itself, the same way a word can carry the emotional residue of every time you've ever heard it used. Now here's the twist, the part that flips everything you thought you understood about your own behavior. If situational norms can activate without any other people present, that means a huge portion of what you experience as personal politeness isn't actually about other people at all. It's about categories, environments, labels. Your mind has already preloaded with instructions before you ever consciously evaluate the situation, You think you're being considerate. You're actually just running a script that was installed in you by repeated exposure. The same script that activates whether the room holds 200 strangers or absolutely no one. This isn't unique to libraries. The same researchers found similar effects in other environments with strong situational identities. Show someone an image of a place associated with restraint, and their behavior shifts to match automatically without deliberation. Your environment isn't just a backdrop for your choices. In a very real sense, your environment is making some of those choices before you do, which raises an uncomfortable question about how much of what you call your personality is actually a long list of rooms you've learned to behave differently inside of. There's a researcher's term for this that's worth knowing. Priming. A stimulus, in this case a category like library, activates a related concept in your mind, in this case, quiet. And that activated concept then shapes your behavior without your awareness. The chain runs from category to concept to action, completely bypassing the part of your brain that feels like it's deciding anything. You experience the outcome as a personal choice. The researchers who study this would tell you it looks a lot more like a switch being flipped. Think about how strange this actually is when you sit with it. A photograph, not even a real place, just a flat image of shelves and tables, was enough to physically change how loudly a stranger's voice came out of their own throat. Nobody told them to be quiet. Nobody was there to judge them if they weren't. And still, the picture did the job a person would normally have to do. So the next time you walk into an empty library and your voice drops to a whisper, you're not really responding to the room. You're responding to every library you've ever been trained by, going back through your own life, and inherited from a tradition that stretches back through Renaissance scriptoriums and medieval monasteries to ancient philosophers complaining about noise from bathhouses below their writing rooms. You're not protecting anyone's concentration. You're completing a ritual that started being written into human behavior long before you were born, and you're doing it on autopilot, in an empty room, certain the whole time that the choice was entirely yours. And maybe that's the real reframe here. You walked into a library expecting silence to be something you offered out of courtesy. It turns out silence was something the room was always going to take from you, whether you offered it or not.